Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our meeting of our Health, Education, Neighborhoods, Parks, Arts, and Rivers Committee. It's a little after 1, and we're in City Hall, room 1060. I'm joined by Councilmember Mitchell Farrell, and we have quorum, and this meeting is called to order. I want to remind everybody who wants to speak on any of the items or on public comment to sign up for the agenda. You could go right outside the door on the kiosk to sign up. And I want to check for general public comment and... Did she sign up for everything? Yeah. She signed up for everything? Okay. So I'm going to take multiple comment item cards. And Antonio Ramirez, I'll give you 3 minutes. 2 for your items. I think you signed up for everything from 1 through 8, and 1 minute for public comment.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with my public comments, please. Thank
Sure.
you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we desperately and urgently need the sheriff's deputies to assist the Music Center Grand Park security officers to enforce public safety and the protection of the visitors at the Music Center Grand Park primarily in both blocks 1 and 4, male and females bathrooms. And we need also protection on the ramp from block 4 to block 3. There's a walkway that transfers you from block 4 to block 3 for handicapped individuals. There's a lot of threats over there. We need to stop the violence, the drugs, the theft, and the rape. I heard a 13-year-old girl got raped at the park in block 4, which is across the street from the city hall. We need to stop assaults and gang stalking. Again, remove all the violent, crazed, filthy white trash, the stink bang junkies who hide their stashed drugs all over the park, the shrubberies, the trees, and the bushes. We need to remove the Chango Latino gangbangers and all the other niggers who are coming here to attack and violate all the wonderful, wonderful people that come to visit the park. And you need safe, clean, energetic, vibrant parks to educate and imbue all humans on better health so that they can create and mold tantalizing, secure, freedom-friendly, and crime-free neighborhoods. Daily teach them classes on civility and wonderful classes on American values like morals, hygiene, sanitary conditions, etiquette, cleanliness, discretion, and how to flush the goddamn toilet. And also Tai Chi and yoga and all those wonderful things that will enhance your physique, your mind, your body, soul, your spirit. It's a wonderful place. The Music Center is darling. It's beautiful. I live there practically. So I absolutely love it. And I would like to incorporate items number 3, number 4, number 5. Remember, LA for Kids Steering Committee, this is wonderful for the wonderful children, the leaders of tomorrow. Let us not forget that they are children. Give them a sense of youth and joy and happiness and freedom and love, and don't put so much stress on them now because they're going to have that stress when they get older. And God knows with technology, it's going to probably put them in their grave a lot earlier. So give them joy. Let them know and let them enjoy their youth, their happiness, and with all that they are young, vibrant, healthy, and happy. Let them be happy. And then 6, I think it's a wonderful gesture on part of the LA to help eliminate suicide for these paralytic youth individuals who are handicapped, that they can participate in the games. And again, in number 7, does it include our handicapped and wounded warriors? Will this program help our wounded military veterans and individuals? And number 8, God bless Donald Trump and God bless America. Thank you very much. And
thank
God
you,
bless
Mr. Ramirez.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there's no one else signed up for general public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on general public comment? All right, we are going to close general public comment. Mr. O'Farrell, if you have no objections, I'd like to recommend that we take items 1, 3, 4, and 5 on consent.
No objection.
Great, that'll be the order. So we will move along to item number 2. Darrell, would you want to read the item into the record, please?
Sure. LA for Kids Steering Committee report relative to the Department of Recreation and Parks proposed park improvement plan to effectively manage Measure A program funds.
Great, thank you. And I think we have Bill Jones or anybody else from Department of Recreation and Parks to come on up to answer a few questions. Thank you, guys. And Bill, do you want to walk us through it, what we have before us?
Certainly. So before you today is the LA for Kids Steering Committee report, in which the Department of Recreation Parks came back per the instruction of council to introduce a 3-year plan and a budget for the initial start of the Measure A annual allocations only. This does not include the competitive grants that will be coming later this year. We've identified 85 park projects. We've addressed many of the issues that council has asked, and we're here to simply ask for concurrence of the LA for Kids Steering Committee recommendations and to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. Do you want to add anything? No? Okay. Very excited about Measure A, and thank you for all your work on this and monitoring this. And a boon for our local parks and green spaces. First question I had was, the park improvement plan is a 3-year program plan, right?
Correct.
Will Recreation and Parks be seeking approval of the allocations proposed for the upcoming fiscal year? And will future allocations need to be approved by the council annually, or?
So yes, the funding would actually have to be approved by the council with each grant program and each grant cycle that comes up. The fiscal year 1920 are expected to be received by the department sometime around the September-October timeframe of this calendar year. And we would be immediately going back, updating the plan with a year 4, as well as coming back to the LA for Kids and the City Council with those numbers.
Okay. So we'll see you every year.
Yes.
Okay. Can you provide us with a few examples of projects that may qualify for funding as part of the capital improvements and programmatic funding categories?
Certainly. So many of the programs, the parks that we're looking at, we are looking at the 2016 Park Needs Assessment that was conducted by the LA County. We're looking at our own asset assessment plan that we've recently completed. We're looking at sports fields, sports field lighting, restrooms, HVAC, things that we can do to improve the programmatic participation in our parks as well as park visitation.
Okay. How much funding? How much of the funding is allocated for the upcoming fiscal years for park improvement, and how much for park creation, roughly? For park improvements, we haven't really broken it down between park improvements and like new parks, like our park acquisition. I believe that for the Measure A annual allocation, we have not allocated funds for park acquisition. We are identifying Prop 68 and Measure A competitive grants for those activities. But money can be used for new park acquisition, right?
Yes, and that should be made clear, is that Measure A annual allocations can be utilized for park acquisition.
But we just don't have any in the pipeline.
Plan.
In the first 3-year plan, okay. How do we include it?
It would be the same process where each year we're going to come to each of the council offices to identify parks and park projects that we would be doing in the same process that we did that led to this report.
Okay. So every council member will have an opportunity.
Correct.
Okay, great. Back in December of 2017, we had a conversation, and we gave instructions were approved in this by our city council, asking Recreation and Parks to report back on the process of entering into joint use agreements with LAUSD. We haven't yet heard back, but I am a firm believer, and I know you guys are working on it, that providing capital improvement funds at LAUSD campuses in return for access could save the city quite a bit of money. And I know the money can't be used for the programmatics, but we could possibly give it to LAUSD for some improvements, right?
So under Measure A, LAUSD could apply directly for Measure A funds for school improvements as long as they had a joint use agreement in place with our park department. We too can apply on behalf of LAUSD, and we are looking at those projects, especially given the more recent agreement that's been signed by the mayor and LAUSD and UTLA for the school greening program.
So what I'm trying to get at is our joint use program. I mean, clearly the missing piece is the funding. And I know our two different attorneys from our side and LAUSD are working on finalizing a more global agreement. And I know we have one-offs that we actually work with LAUSD schools to use their space. But how can we because I know some of the Measure A dollars are prohibitive for going towards program, but how can we somehow creatively do something where we could make the joint use move it one step further?
Sure, it's one of the things that we continue to go back to the LA County to address, and we've presented them with several situations or scenarios to date. To date, none of those scenarios have resulted in anything that they could support with Measure A funding at this time. There are two programmatic activities that we might be able to discuss with LAUSD under the youth and veterans training, job training program within the areas of park management, and see if those can somehow be incorporated. The discussions are continue. RPOSD for LA County is open to these ideas, these discussions. They want to hear our ideas, but it's just taking it one at a time.
Okay, well, I'm going to follow up on that, but I want to open up to the council. Member O'Farrell, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one thing we hear a lot about are the restrooms and the conditions of the restrooms at parks. Some of them need to be replaced entirely. So I would imagine, based on some of the assessments from Rec and Parks, that you have a short list, maybe it's a long list, but a list of the restrooms that need to be refurbished or replaced.
Yes.
Yes? And then another real issue that I think prevents the ability for nighttime activities for kids, especially in the summertime, but into the fall, is field lights.
Yes.
And I know we have a short list in my district. It's a very short list, actually, of parks that we would like to see lights. So I would love to hear more about that and the actual parks that are identified to install night lights. And then lastly, general maintenance is improving at our parks for sure. I remember what it was like 15 years ago and during some of the recessionary eras when maintenance was an issue. But I think these funds are a golden opportunity to leverage current dollars that we get from the budget every year for just general maintenance needs. Something as simple as mowing the grass and taking care of the plants, et cetera. So any comment on any of those three?
So I'll start with the second item first. Measure A funds are predominantly for capital development.
Yes.
And cannot be used for routine maintenance, but you're absolutely correct. We can look to leverage.
Right. They can be used for costs already incurred, maintenance costs for costs already incurred.
So yes, the under the Measure A maintenance funds that we're eligible to receive, about $3 million has been allocated to the city of Los Angeles as an area. It would be for the parks as well as any of the nonprofits that have had prior A measure funded projects or going forward Measure A projects.
All right.
That are the incremental difference in what it was to operate that facility prior to the award of the grant to after.
Okay, got it.
And so we
Thanks for that
typically look to
clarification.
our pools like Expo or Hanson Dam, things where we've incurred large costs to maintain those facilities.
All right. So it's all about leveraging. So you can spend more money on the capital and then you're using budgetary money for better maintenance.
Correct.
Improved maintenance. Okay. And then lastly, on the joint use agreement, how are the conversations going with LAUSD? Because in my experience, I would argue, generally speaking, that's been the roadblock.
I'm actually not prepared to talk to that. I've not been involved in those negotiations, but we could certainly get back to your office and talk.
Luckily, you have the director here.
Mr. Scholl's here. But I remember a couple of years ago, thank you. I remember a couple of years ago, Mr. Scholl, that how LAUSD, they actually changed their policy and made a decision. I think it was before the current superintendent. I think it was prior to Michelle King, in fact. Yeah. They were really declining entering into any other joint use agreements, and then they were shortening the terms of them. So they were kind of on the retreat. So as much as the county or the city may want this, where are we with LAUSD?
Well, we've been, two answers to that. First, there was a short-term answer that we started a community school parks program, which they've been very supportive of. Those are short-term agreements that we renew on an annual basis with them, but really just gives us access to the playground and to be able to a limited school grounds to, it's a very simple agreement. It's not long-term, so we couldn't use those agreements necessarily to do capital improvements, but we have gotten access to them. But I'll just tell you that we don't feel that those have been very successful, not because of LAUSD, but mainly because we need to probably do some investment into the schools. The playgrounds are not shaded, or they're not. It's just, it's hot, and it's not. It's just not. It's not a park, you know. So but what I would say to that is on the longer term strategy, and I think with the teachers union strike and the settlement of that strike, it's actually written into the language of the settlement that there will be a working group established with LAUSD, the city, and certainly we'll be part of that, and that we can begin to strategically move larger joint use projects forward.
Oh, good.
So I think the outlook is very good. That's just going to take a little time, as Bill was saying, to work through that. But we're continuing to look at the community school parks program, and we've been specifically on joint use. We've been targeting only areas of the city where there's not access to a park. So that's how we've been trying to prioritize it. And then there's many areas across the city that don't have a park within walking distance. So that's kind of in our larger park goals, but it's kind of the short and the long term.
Makes sense. And then lastly, Star just reminded me that another frequent complaint is air conditioning, right? And I mean, I think most rec and parks facilities have their punch list of repairs that are needed. So are these monies going toward repairing HVAC systems?
I think that goes back to your first question
Yeah.
regarding the sports field lighting and restrooms. Yes, we are targeting all of those areas because we know that they increase participation,
Yeah.
and we want to get the kids and the communities into our parks.
Right, and we'll probably have to have more cooling centers this summer. So,
It's your point is very well taken. I mean, the big part of our strategy going forward with working with each of the council districts on Measure A is really trying to target parks in each of your districts that are in need of these monies would help generate more participation in the park. So it might be park lighting,
right.
could be sports field lighting, like you had mentioned.
It's gonna be a little different
HVAC. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we limit ourselves on. We have capacity in our facilities to take in more kids, so we need to, I'll talk about that in my next. But I won't take your time on that.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. And actually, no, it's okay. I had a recommendation based on what Bill said and what the council member said and what Mike was alluding to. I do want to use this opportunity to continue our conversation with the LAUSD Joint Use Program. So we're going to go ahead and approve this report, but I would like to see a report back in 60 days on the committee instruction approved in December 2017 about the joint use and circumstances in which Measure A funding could be used as part of the establishment of a master joint use agreement with LAUSD. And I think you kind of said you're already working on that. And of course, leave it open any opportunities to include LAUSD sites and facilities in future Measure A allocations and programs. And I think the general manager also talked about these schools need investment. So if we could somehow partner with them and get them to, so we can move the overall, and I know it could be done because the mayor's office already are doing it on a school-by-school basis, but we want to do it, have some sort of joint use citywide.
Certainly.
Thank you. So ordered. Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Great. So item number 6 and 7, like to take it up together. And Mr. CLA, can you read both of those items in?
Item number 6, motion O'Farrell Wesson, instructing the Department of Recreation and Parks with the assistance of the Chief Legislative Analyst, CAO, and all other affected departments to report on program to implement the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Youth Sports Program, also referred to the Ad hoc Committee on the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Game Committee. Number 7, motion Rodriguez-Rue relative to the adaptive youth sports programming that serves the special needs and disabled youth population.
Great, thank you. And very exciting. We've been looking forward to this report. If you want to walk us through the 28 Olympic and Paralympic Youth Sports Program.
Yeah, thank you. Again, Mike Shull, General Manager, Rec and Parks, joined on my right by Mr. A.P. Diaz, our Executive Officer. So this, as it was just stated, this was a presentation that, it's the exact presentation given at the Olympic Ad Hoc Committee roughly 2 weeks ago. So I'll just walk you through it. It's a departmental, it's kind of our vision for youth sports. We do are probably the largest provider of youth sports in the city of Los Angeles, and we think we have lots of room to grow. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. So the first slide is really just three main things that we kind of used to guide us through this program. This wasn't something that we just came up with without trying out a number of different initiatives. So the three kind of big initiatives that we've done is the Girls Play LA, which is a focus on increasing girls' participation in sports and fitness programs around the city. And we've done that by subsidizing any GPLA program, which is any girls' sports program in the city of Los Angeles. It was $10 to participate in that program, regardless of where the facility is located. And in about 3 years, we've gone from 24% participation to 42% participation in our girls' sports initiative. So there's that, and then we did what we called the Universal Play pilot study, which is kind of what we're talking about, a larger Universal Play program today. But the pilot, we did it roughly at, I think it was 7 different parks where we wanted to see what the impacts were. We've always subsidized our programs, but we've never subsidized them down to $10. Meaning that, one program, and depending on what we thought the community could afford, could be anywhere from $40 to $60, and in some communities that same program might be $80 to $100. We've always tried to, have equity amongst our programs across the city. But in this case, we looked at 7 sites in what we considered underserved areas, and we reduced the cost of any sports and fitness program for boy or girl. Anything from cheer, anything that got kids moving. It could be a dance class, it could be anything that really got kids moving. And in less than, and I'll get into this a little bit more, in less than a year, we doubled the number of kids participating at those parks. And then lastly, Swim LA was a program we did last year with free swim lessons that you've heard a lot about, and where we doubled the number of swim lessons. These were all free. We've had a great partnership with LA84 and with Kaiser, and now with LA28, where we provided free swim lessons across the city, and we went from 18,000 roughly to about 36,000 kids learning to swim last summer. And I'll talk a little bit more about that again later. So this is a 9 to 10 year plan. It says 10, but we're less than 10 years away from the Olympics now. But it's really about removing cost as a barrier to participate, and it's really an equity-based approach at 123 rec centers. It's 123 because that's all the rec centers we have. We have almost 500 parks, but of those 500, we do the majority of our sports and fitness programs at about 123 recreation sites. We have other recreation sites that don't have an active physical building but have fields and things like that, but this is where we have the majority of our staff. So I'm just trying to qualify why it's 123. We have lots of pocket parks and things like that, but we don't do a lot of programming there. So again, it's and we looked at of those 123, we really kind of honed in on about 91 of those sites, and the reason why is because we looked at on bullet point number 2, we looked at the family income level around that rec center. So we really wanted to understand, the economics around each rec center. So we looked at the economics around a half-mile radius of that facility. So roughly 91 of those sites are in an area where the income level is less than $60,000 a year. Now that's just a number that we chose to use as a guide to trying to figure out how much this program would cost if we did 91 sites. This is a very scalable program on whether we did 91 or all 123 or we did 30. I mean, it's very scalable. So the idea is to subsidize the variable cost. And the variable costs are the trophies, the uniforms, the officials, and the part-time staff. Those are the things that generally cost the department. So what we limit ourselves on is if we have to charge for those things, we can only, there's only so many kids that we can put in a program. If we're charging, $50 and we're only getting 10 kids to play, we put ourselves in a no-win situation where if the rec staff are trying to worry about the cost of the program and being able to pay for all these things, because the department is not funded for these things, a lot of it is revenue that we bring in, and we turn around and put it back into the communities. Certainly it costs us a lot more than that to put these programs on, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's just about expanding programming, and not just our programming, but other partnerships, including adaptive sports. And I know that's one of the motions. And in adaptive sports, I'll tell you that we have a lot of work to do on adaptive sports. I don't have a lot of direct answers for you today on an adaptive sports program. I'm just being honest with you. I think we are very capable of doing it, but we're actively engaging with a number of partners, to be able to figure out which rec centers would be the rec centers to be used and what types of programs we would offer. We've met several times with, the the USTA, the U.S. Tennis Association, who has a tennis program in adaptive sports. AP has set up meetings with the Angel City Sports, who puts on a large annual games. We're kind of attacking it from another angle, getting a lot of information to see how we could best do this. What we have found is that not a lot of cities do this. So it's, but it's not that we can't. We can, but I can't tell you which rec centers this would happen at, what programs today. But just only to say that we're taking this. It's extraordinarily important, and this whole program has to include an adaptive sports part of it. And then lastly, just improving our underutilized assets. Our tennis courts are one. We have almost 400 tennis courts around the city of LA, and a lot of the tennis courts in the underserved areas really don't get used. We're actually now starting to program some of those tennis courts, and from Rec and Park staff, we're working with the USTA. USTA has already trained over 400 of our staff, recreation staff, to be able to start offering lessons at a lot of our parks. Talk about baseline metrics, because it's important to understand that 123 rec centers and 53 swimming pools, we evaluated the details of each. And we had to evaluate them in a number of different categories. Number one, we had to see what is the capacity of each park. Each park is not equal. Each park has different assets. It might have multiple athletic fields where one park may only have a gymnasium. So looking at the capacity so that we could begin to measure how much of the programming we're doing, how many kids are participating, and how many kids we can actually serve in the parks. We looked at the gender participation numbers, as I already stated, the income level within a half-mile radius of each recreation site, and we looked at a staffing profile for both recreation and maintenance full-time staff. There's a certain level of staff that we need to have at each park, so it was important to understand where they are and where we have gaps. And then lastly, facilities. We've done a fairly detailed assessment of the different facilities of each of these parks to see what the capital needs are, the quantity and types of facilities we have there. All of these went into evaluating the recommendations that we're making to you today. So this is an interesting little graph. This is just to put it into perspective of the 123 recs. So the first chart is the pie chart on your left. You'll see that 73% of our rec centers are located in areas where the income level is less than $60,000. Now, I would say I should qualify that as well, is that this is based on the last census. Obviously, a lot has changed in 10 years. We're going to have to go back and relook at these numbers after the new census comes out, but this is based on that data. And then the other two pieces of the pie are much smaller, 60 to 80,000. We have 16% of our rec centers, and anything above 80,000 as high as 275,000, 11% of our rec centers. So it's really important to see, and you can see the breakdown of the pie chart to the left of how many that are in the really low income. And to me, that's very enlightening, because I feel like we're in the areas of the city where we need to be. And it's a really important part of making sure that those communities who are going without have that opportunity. And in a lot of cases, we are the only option for a lot of communities in a lot of those parts of the city. To your right, just a quick graph on, this was on the pilot sites, and you'll see the 4 quarters of programming: fall, winter, spring, and summer. That's how we do our schedule all of our programming. We started it in fall of 2017. That's the blue. And we actually see we didn't really have any change in participation, mainly, and I'll just tell you, mainly is because the quarter had already started when we started the program. So we had to we didn't really have a time to market it. But you'll see what happened when we did have that time, the spikes in the number of kids participating in those programs. For example, in the winter, it went from 1,040 to almost 3,000 at those 7 sites. It makes a huge difference in these communities. We heard over and over and over again from mothers, who would come in to sign up one child and be like, wait a minute, this is only $10? What is this program? Is this the same program? It's the same uniform, same trophy, same everything. We're subsidizing it. And they're like, well, can I sign up all 4 of my kids? And we're like, yes. And then all of a sudden you go from 1 to, the whole family participating. That's what this program is about. Obviously, we want to make this so regardless of your family income or regardless of your zip code, it shouldn't matter. You should be able to participate in a youth and sports fitness program around the city. And this first bullet is this is an estimation of what we did internally that we believe we already spend as a city and as part of our budget that is approved by by the members sitting here today, is about $100 million of our total budget goes towards recreational programming. That's the money that keeps the lights on, does the maintenance at the park, does the programming at the park, does a lot of, supervision and all those things that go into running a program. We've estimated it at about $100 million. It's important only to say is that we have a lot of skin in the game as a city, in investing. Unfortunately, it's just not quite enough. And, and that's kind of what we're talking about. So our baseline enrollment is about 200,000 kids around the city. That includes all of our permit groups as well. So these aren't just the kids that we serve, but it's the kids that are being served by all of our permit groups. We think if we get the right resources and we get the subsidy money that we need, we can easily double the number of kids up to 400,000 participating in our youth sports fitness programs around the city by the time we get to the Olympics in 2028. Big numbers here. We need to invest $2.4 billion in staff operations and subsidies over the next 10 years. The number's not that scary because we're already putting in $100 million annually. So that would be $1 billion of that 2.4. Unless something drastically changed, that's money that's in our baseline budget. Our grant-funded capital projects, as Bill was talking about Measure A today, but when we looked at the Measure A money over the next 9 to 10 years, you look at Prop 68 money that's coming in, and you look at Quimby and other funding sources that we normally get, we're going to invest, without any other help, about $500 million into the park system over the next 9 to 10 years. We think it needs to be a little closer to $1 billion investment. And this is only at those 123 sites and plus the 53 swimming pools. It's not all 500 parks. If you look at all 500 parks, that $1 billion goes up to much larger than that. But we're trying to focus on where the recreational programs are happening and where we can make the biggest difference in the park system. So it leaves us with about a $900 million gap. That gap is broken down as shown on this slide. It's about $87 million of that is money that we need in full-time operations staff. Again, this is spread out over 9 to 10 years. And that's just gaps where we don't have enough, where we feel we don't have enough maintenance staff or enough full-time recreational staff. $160 million we believe is needed in subsidies, and that could be through our partner with LA28, but we also think we need other partners. We need many partners as it pertains to this. LA28 is the big one that we talk about, but certainly GPLA has gotten a lot of partners attached to it over the time that it's been successful. We think over the next 9 to 10 years it won't just be that organization, it'll be other organizations as well. But we really want to use whatever money that we can get in, we want to use that money to subsidize the cost, the variable cost of the program. We should not, my recommendation is not to try to use, money that's not sustainable over the long history for full-time staff, but really looking at, part-time staff and looking at the other variables, including uniforms and officials and trophies and all those sorts of costs that go along with putting on a quality program. And then that's the $650 million in capital needs. That's, I don't have an answer. I'm just saying that's kind of where we feel a gap is needed, really to make, these parks the quality parks that we need. So a lot of this money goes into, new swimming pools, new recreation centers, things like that. Talk about that in a minute. But again, it's about $1.15 billion estimated by us for capital improvement needs at 123 sites, rec centers, and 53 pools. When I say rec centers, I want to qualify that by saying a rec center, I mean the entire park. It's not just the building, but it's the sports fields and all the things that go along with that. And again, we're going to invest about approximately $500 million over that time through those sources that are identified there. And as Bill was talking about, and as we've already talked about in the Measure A presentation, is that we really want to focus to prioritize our capital improvement projects by need and impact on capacity. So if we can add sports field lighting to a park that's not lit, that does dramatic changes to a community where you won't be able to, where you can't use a soccer field because it's not lit, almost 6 to 8 months time out of the year because it's getting dark too early, and after school. We also want to obviously update our existing facilities, but we also want to invest in large recreational centers and swimming pools. And I mean facilities like, I don't want to necessarily say like Exposition Center, but facilities like that. We need to have, our rec centers need to be more than just a gymnasium. They need to be larger to accommodate many different recreational needs that could be happening at the same time, as well as different community needs, whether it's a meeting by a neighborhood council or, any class that's being put on by anybody, but just having the ability to program multiple things during, while the gymnasium's being built. Our old rec centers are really not built that way, but we really need to start thinking that way. And ideally, we would also combine that with a year-round swimming pool. So if we could replace a rec center, a park that has a rec center and a pool, and integrate that into one facility, not only will it save us money in the long term on operational costs of that facility, but it'll also serve the community on a much larger community because it'll serve multiple citizens around the city at the same time.
And Mike, if you don't mind, just a quick little indulgence. The model for that could be the Hollywood Rec Center. 'Cause
Yes.
It's got the new pool. It's world
Absolutely.
class. There are plans and funding being put in place to replace the old gym.
Absolutely.
It's so old it has a fireplace.
It's true. It's very true.
You could be playing basketball and the ball goes into the fireplace because that's how you heat the building. But anyway, and it's kind of small, so that could be the perfect model for what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Build a multi-use gymnasium plus.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think we just need to pause on, what we think of our facilities before we just jump into a design and really look at how it's serving the community and whether it's really serving the community.
Right.
I mean, if you have, like that gymnasium's a perfect example. If the gym's being used, there's 20 kids playing? I mean, there might be some but there's not. You can't do a lot there without multiple spaces. So we're looking at adding. These buildings need to be larger, and we have the ability to do that. But of course, it's going to cost more money. But I think we just need to pause and look at it and make a decision with our elected leadership as well on, do we make these facilities more of a regional type facility? And again, as Bill was saying, just we think prioritizing like security lighting, sports field lighting, restrooms, which was brought up today, artificial turf fields, athletic fields, and making ADA upgrades are kind of where we really need to hone in on a lot of the current upgrades of our parks. And of course, leveraging, we're going to need to leverage that money against, whether it's Quimby or these other sources as much as we can. This chart, I just really wanted, so when we looked at, this is just kind of a summary of how we looked at our capital needs of that 1.15 billion. Again, and it says 145 because that's that's roughly all the stuff put together with facilities that don't have an actual building on them but still have athletic fields. But about 50% of the money would be spent on rec centers, and about 30% on pools. Should not be a big surprise. Those are our biggest, most expensive assets. And then, of course, sports fields are next. And then you'll see tennis, restrooms, playgrounds, and other. I just wanted to give you a snapshot of how we looked at it and what we thought would cost the most money. Real quick on Swim LA, I talked about our partners with Kaiser, LA 84 and LA 28, doubling our swim lessons. It's just a really successful program. Our staff have just really hit it out of the park with this program. They're adding different components to it with water safety presentations this year for the family, for people who have pools. This program, all it did is we expanded the hours of our pools, either in the morning and evening, and dedicated that time to give lessons, swim lessons. We did not want to take away from the recreational swim that we offer to many of these pools, so that adding that extra hour or two at the beginning of the day to focus on swim lessons is how we basically accomplished it. But a great program, and we hope to go from 36. We're setting some new goals of getting to 40,000 this summer. So we'll stay tuned. We're going to give it a go this summer. Just reaching towards the end here. some of the key components of how we're going to reach, this kind of 400,000 number of kids served around the city in our youth and sports programs is we think a lot of it will come through the subsidized programming. So, which could go from, and this is really focused on our programs. I think there's going to be lots of partners that can be involved in this, but for this slide, it's really just about the programs that we're offering. But increasing, we could easily, just by subsidizing the programs, we think it can increase by 60,000 participants, expanding hours at seasonal pools, conversion of some pools to year-round operation. That creates a huge jump in the number of kids that we can serve in our swimming pools. It is expensive. It's very expensive to run a year-round pool versus a seasonal pools. And I know we get a lot of questions about our we have 7 seasonal pools that are only open during the summer. But the cost difference to operate that, and it's just it's really a budget question. But I do think we need to look at that strategically around the city and marrying it, like we were just talking about, with like a regional complex. And then the strategic capital investment over the next is just doing that, and this is probably the easiest, a lot of the quickest way is getting to increase participation is by just doing strategic capital investments on our lighting and sports fields and things like that we can just, all of a sudden this park is now being used, 3 to 4 times the amount that it currently was. Also, it makes it gives a better vibe to that community and a safer place to play. But there's lots of things we need to look at. We need to look at our full-time staff and the staff that we have and the staff that we need. There's some stuff in our budget that we're looking at on how to do that. Subsidizing the cost of the program to $10, and then we also think, and this last one is just worth mentioning, that data collection on this is extraordinarily important because of our partners. We're going to need to, and also for us to manage. I mean, we've taken the data collection in our department to a much higher level. We need to go high. We need to go more than what we're currently doing. I mean, we've invested almost $1 million into a system that allows us to it's automated the signups and things like that. But where I can tell you by any park in the city, by what program, on what date, how many kids were in this program and that participated in that program. But there's many steps beyond that. So, investing in just a small amount of staff to do that, we think is really important. And it'll also be very important in our grant opportunities. And then just, by the time we get to 2028, we'll have accessible youth programs, world-class facilities, and Olympic, Paralympic, legacy programs is really the ultimate 3 goals.
Thank you. It's great. Thank you for that presentation. And Mr. O'Farrell, I know you already heard this in your ad hoc, so I apologize if some of these questions you already asked.
It's
but,
good again. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do have a few questions. Your $10 reduced fee.
Yep.
That's a great idea and great numbers. And it seems like it's for families making under 60,000, right?
Let me qualify that. We think that, I think what we would like to do is figure out a way to certify or to site certify a park, saying that, okay, this park, because of the community it's in, it would be $10. Mm-hmm. But, for any program. But we also think that we should be doing this citywide, meaning that every community may not on the surface look like there's a need, but there may be families in there, so they're just having individual scholarships for them on an as-needed basis is important. So it would be for everybody. We'd make it just a little bit easier for those communities that we know that are like in such an economic. And again, Councilmember, we use 60,000, but it could be scaled either way. But
so that's my question, and I'm sure that's what how did you verify? So what verification process did you use for the current pilots, and then, or how do you plan to verify going forward?
Well, that needs to be included as part of the ultimately what it gets put into the games agreement is how we qualify that, and that's kind of what we're working on, and some of the recommendations that we'll be bringing forward.
So how have you guys qualified for the pilot projects right now? Just the whole everybody, or
everybody?
Okay.
Everybody, and at those particular sites, we didn't ask for any. We didn't ask them to bring in anything, and a lot of it too is that we want to be careful in a lot of those communities because of immigration and issues like that. We don't want to scare people away by having them fill out a lot of paperwork. We try to keep it simple. and it has worked. But I think there is a place where you could do that. Even in the higher income level areas, and I think we should offer that opportunity in all areas.
Yeah, no, very interested what you guys ultimately come up with, because obviously we want to be as expansive as possible, but
Right.
you definitely want to target those lower income communities. So I think everything you're exploring now is going in a good direction. But why $10? Why not just free?
Well, that's a good question.
Because I know the Olympics the deal was free, right?
We talked to a lot of folks, a lot of recreation professionals, not just here in LA, but around. And the general thought on that is that if you make it free, you lose that kind of like having just a little bit of skin in the game, like coming to the practices and coming to the games and getting them actually to participate. If it's free, it's like, we didn't pay for it, so we don't.
Yeah.
It's a psychological thing. And that's why it was $10.
No, I mean, I know when this was first presented by the Olympics 28, they wanted a free program, and I fully supported that. But I get the $10. I mean, and you could make an argument both ways.
Yeah.
It's only $10, but
Right.
But yeah, no. But I'd really like to see how the rollout is and see what happens, and it'll be good to even in your next pilot see if it's free and if it's a reduced involvement, right? Because that'll show it. Another question about capacity. Earlier, it was for a previous item. You mentioned that a lot of our parks have the capacity. Well, I mean, if it gets a little bit renovated or updated, it can have the capacity.
Well, yeah. So there's
Yeah.
two parts to that.
Right.
In the 91 sites where we looked at that were under $60,000 in those areas, and that's kind of the focus of this program. We are only at those 91 sites even if we didn't do any improvements. We're only at about 56% capacity.
Wow.
So, and if you look at the sites above that and the income levels above that, we're closer to 75, 70, approaching 80% capacity. Some parks we are at capacity,
Like the ones in my district.
like
Yeah.
like a couple in your district. But it's so it's in it. But again, that was just part of the data that we used to say that's and we think it's cost.
Uh-huh.
That's the biggest barrier.
Oh, okay.
There are other barriers that we need to address. I mean, certainly we need to right staffing levels. The park needs to be clean, it needs to be safe, it needs to be all those things. All of that goes together. It's not one or the other, but it's the capacity. We have a lot of room, and then just if we did improvements there, we can even expand even beyond that.
So we do have.
We have room to grow.
So we have parks that are underutilized.
We have lots of parks that are underutilized.
Wow.
And I
Okay.
think that's an important part of this as well. Is that part of what we've been pressing with our team is pushing to get to those capacity. And that data piece that I mentioned, why that's so critical is that now it's not like we have like a watchful eye exactly on what's happening at every park, but we have the ability to, if there's if a park. Generally, a park that's well programmed and a lot happening in, it's a much safer place that families want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's we now have the ability through technology to monitor that at a very close level, and it's really paying off. I mean, it's I think what's holding us back now is just the funding to allow us to subsidize the programs down to a level that we need to.
Okay. So right now it's like a mini pilot. So what's the next steps? Are you going to make it a larger pilot, or what's the whole rollout?
Well, I think that's ultimately what probably goes into the games agreement is how we, if we're looking to, and we are looking to use, some of the money that's available through, what was negotiated by the mayor and LA 28 for, this is looking at how we can roll something out, and then, obviously making a recommendation, that would ultimately be approved by the mayor and city council, but. That's why I said we kind of picked what we thought was the big number, but whether or not it's smaller than that, it can be. And then we could even phase it, maybe the first few years. One of the things that we think will happen, though, is that once we subsidize, we think we'll get to capacity very quickly at those parks. Like, it won't take 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take 3.
And those parks that you identified were based on socioeconomic levels?
Yes.
Okay. So you might roll it out to all 123 parks and the 53 swimming pools. But right now, it's only the 91, right? Or you're,
It could be. I mean, I personally, and I'll just be honest with you, I don't think we should, I don't think there's a need to subsidize it, at a lot of these communities. I think we should focus and, I think if you can, much like any of us, if we can afford to pay, we should pay. But, so I mean, I just think in those communities that are part of the 123 that may not be as part of this program, we shouldn't roll out the fact that somebody in that community might need this assistance, and we should offer that assistance if it's needed. That's what I mean by that. I don't think we should exclude anybody. Nobody should ever be turned away, regardless of where you live, from a Rec and Parks program. Period.
Okay.
I mean, just should never happen.
so, I mean, I know there's a lot of variables here, and I know many of the parks in my districts are already at capacity. But for those areas, as well as if you overlay the fact that in the lower income areas where they are at capacity already, I want to go back to my joint use agreement. Have you guys looked at evaluating school sites that could be used to accommodate for those areas that don't have the park capacity?
I think first of all, joint use should play and will play a very important role in the rollout of this program in the long term. We have been focusing and honed in on our parks only because we have so much room to grow that we haven't put the focus. I'm just being honest with we haven't put the focus on it just because we haven't taken care of our own house yet.
Great.
And I just want to make sure that we got everything in order before we start expanding, because we got to be careful. It's like when we do like a large joint use agreement with athletic fields at a school, that's going to require its own staff, and we'll need to budget for that to create so that we're not taking staff from another park. It's only going to hurt them from running their so it's just a balancing act. But for now, I mean, it absolutely is important, no question.
I just want to make sure that's just on the table and you guys are
Absolutely.
considering that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I didn't realize about the underutilized parks, but
Yep.
great. One last question, I'll turn it over to Councilman O'Farrell. On page 6 of slide 6, you talked about you're already investing $100 million and your baseline enrollment is approximately 200,000 kids, and you could double it. So right now, I mean, tell me if I'm missing some numbers here. It seems like we're spending about $500 per kid.
Yep.
Is that? I don't know. It kind of sounds high, but I don't know. Is it high? Is it low?
When you look at Costa, I mean, just look at our utility. I mean, you've all seen it in our budget. It's gone up every year. It is high, but it's not. When you run an operation as large as what we're running, those numbers are big, and it's very astute. It's about $500 a child. To pay for the lights, to pay for the air conditioning, to pay for the staff, to pay for all the other pieces. And it is an estimate. I mean, it's not a precise science. I can't.
Do we have a comparison? I mean, like to other cities
it's
or other? It's
extraordinarily difficult to benchmark us because even like with
YMCA, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just there's not a lot of cities that for 365 days a year offer the amount of recreational programming. In fact, I don't think there is any. When you look at cities like Chicago and New York that have these large recreational, when it's wintertime, they're not out there. We're playing soccer every day. So it's just hard to, and that's part of the reason why the costs are, because we don't ever close. We're never, our fields are being used 365 days a year. Our rec centers are being used almost 365 days a year. But.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. O'Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few brief comments because we did hear this in Ad hoc Olympic Committee. But what's interesting is I hear this report again. I'm just mindful that this IOC agreement has birthed something much more than just the $160 million agreement. And I've, as long as I've been on the City Council since 2013, I've never heard such articulation of all of the needs in the neighborhoods and this whole prioritized by need and impact. It's such a great focus, and I think there's better clarity than we've ever had because of, I think, many factors. The fact that you already were doing these evaluations anyway, but it's a great place to be right now, and that is knowing exactly what we need and when we need it over the next 9 or 10 years. And the data collection is critical. And so we need to make sure and keep that going because that's so informative. And that allows us to put our resources where the greatest need is. And this youth sports fitness program so far, to think that you've, and I said this at committee previously, but you've doubled the participation in Swim LA. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then the girls' participation increase. It's really terrific. And I think that what doesn't necessarily get talked about with all this is when you go into these communities that have been historically disadvantaged because of cost being a barrier. And I think the $10 fee does remove cost as a barrier. And I think that it's an investment that's reasonable for most families. But what this also does, the more of these kids that get involved in sports when they are economically at the margins, is they then do better academically. So what I love about this whole idea is if we go from 200,000 to 250,000 to 300 to 400,000 participants, there are benefits way beyond just being involved in recreation at our local recreation centers. It really does help a child all around. And just as a former athlete in the public school system myself, I can personally attest to that benefit. So knowing what this approach will do in our neighborhoods beyond just the recreation centers is very impactful. And I think that's phenomenal news. And it's a real positive step. The sorts of things that never ever get reported on in the media, by the way. But that's just life.
Right.
So I think it's a great place to start, and I think we're on our way to an improved recreation and parks system across the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I take it you guys will be in the future reporting back to us, right?
We have
Yeah,
to. Yeah,
right.
all of this will ultimately have to come to the
Good.
city council.
Then what I
You know what we can do, Mr. Chair, perhaps? Because you're reporting again, maybe more than one additional time, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it'll probably be part of the preparation of the.
Because we could do joint committee
Sure.
meetings, because because Curran and myself are already on the ad hoc, and so
Yeah.
we could combine
Yeah.
for these updates, and it would save.
That'd be great.
save some
yeah,
time.
yeah. Anyway, just thought I'd put
I
that out there.
appreciate that. And I just, I know we have some rec staff here, and I want to thank AP. And it's just, the department has really gelled around this, and it's, it's just the excitement. We've never had this kind of excitement, to this level in the department. I just want to thank all of them, and our entire team have just done a fantastic job.
Great. So you know what? At the next meeting or the next report, we're open to a joint meeting, and so I'd like to move to concur with the instructions approved by the ad hoc on the 2028 Olympics Committee on March 27th. And I just want to add at the next report, if you could make sure to mention or look into the LAUSD joint use, which you're already doing, and also if you could pay careful attention to the adaptive sports, which I know you are already, as indicated by Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez's motion.
Absolutely.
So if you could give us a section on, or just updates on those two.
Absolutely.
Thank
We'll
you.
work with Justin Orenstein from your office.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just for the record, so you're approving both report?
Yeah. Yes, both reports for items 6 and 7, and we'll move them along to the council. Thank you. So, moving to the last item, number 8, Mr. CLA, if you could read that in.
Item number 8, motion Krikorian, Harris Dawson, O'Farrell, Rodriguez, relative to the licensed care program, including information on cost of the program, number of children served, wait list, fees associated with the program, and scalability of the current program. This item is also referred to the Economic Development Committee.
Great, thank you. And we have Representative Carolyn James from the Recreation and Parks. Do you want to walk us through Recreation and Parks child care programming that it currently is, and it was in pre-recession times?
Okay, good afternoon, committee. My name is Carolyn James, Principal Record Supervisor. We had, since 1986, state licensed child care programming, and by 2010, we had 26 sites, and by 2010, the economic downturn caused us to reduce the program to 2. The reason those 2 programs were maintained because they were for preschool students and they were tied to a California Department of Education grant. At that time, those we served about 1,100 to 1,200 students. We had school-age students and preschool students at the 2 sites, and they were state licensed. 12 of those, or 18 of those sites, so maybe it was 12, it's been a while, it's been 9 years, there was a grant tied to them, which in 2008, the state decided to take away the school aid component and focus that more into the school district, and the child care program lost that funding.
Okay. Yeah. I know childcare is a tremendous difficult thing to tackle. And I know the county of LA has been trying to tackle this issue for a long time, where they subsidize childcare facilities, the few that they have, and they can't seem to get anybody to respond and do it. So I know how difficult this is. So what are I know that there's still ongoing funding and needs assessment discussions happening both in Sacramento and the county. Are we working with them at all, or what's going on the state front and the county front?
We have not been really involved with the discussion between Sacramento and the county regarding child care funding, because until the motion passed, this was just a status quo for our department, just 2. We do, like I said, still get funding in the amount of about $500,000 for those 2 sites,
Mm-hmm.
which covers staffing costs, supplies, books, and part-time, and food for some of those sites, for those
Okay.
2 sites.
Well, we definitely, and I'm gonna recommend that we work closely with especially the county, because I think there's some leveraging and some win-win solutions that could be made there if we combine our resources together.
Mhm.
But you said, and I also want to add, we went from 26 to 2. That's and you said we currently have $500,000. So what does that turn out to be the monthly fee per child at one of our programs?
Well, they allow, the grants cover about 60 children in both sites, and they pay us about $45 per child per day, year-round. But it's only right now for the 4-year-olds, because the focus is on 4s more, not so much as the 2.5 to 3. We are only allowed about $8,000 a year for the 2.5-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4-year-olds get the bulk of the money under the California State Preschool Program, CSPP, because they're prepping them for kinder, which we prep them for kinder when they hit the door. But anyway, California Department of Ed has deemed that money as preschool or kinder prep. So we have about 60 children that are able to partake in the programs
Mhm.
because of that at both sites.
Do you want to add to that?
I just wanted to say that it's it's interesting that these items, as we talk about universal play, it's a lot of our childcare sites are in those very same communities that we just talked about. And when I was here with Carolyn at that time, in the department when we had to start things we couldn't do anymore, and licensed childcare was one of the ones that we had to subsidize heavily. And the thing with licensed childcare that's important to mention, it's not, we are required under law to have certain staff ratios, and based on age, and especially if you have infants. I mean, there's things that you cannot not do.
Mm-hmm.
And and again, this is just from memory. I just remember in the discussions at that time, because it was a really difficult time for us, and it was a difficult time to say that we weren't going to do this anymore. And it was, and from what I remember, it was a program that cost multiple millions of dollars to put on, but we weren't able to collect nearly even close to the amount of money that it costs to put on these programs. So I just wanted to share that because I remember I wasn't in the position obviously I was in then, and it was, even if I had been, it wouldn't have mattered. It just means that I was watching it a little bit from afar, thinking, wow, this is really, things are really bad if we, and it just goes to show, it's just those, if it's not affordable, you can't get, the kids to participate. And it's like, oh, how do you, and the grants began to dry up and everything's, it's like, how do you do it, and how do you, but it is a very important issue. And we do a lot, and Carolyn really didn't say, we still do a lot of like after school care and before school. We still do that.
Mhm.
It's just not technically
Yeah.
child care.
No, and I'm not faulting you because I know I was on
No.
I was on the county side, and the county has so much more resources and dedicated funding streams for this, and even they couldn't afford it. We couldn't open these sites, and I remember that over a decade ago. No matter how much subsidies you give, and there were RFPs that were given out to do private-public partnerships, and there were tremendous subsidies given, free space given, but
Right.
even then, no one would respond.
Right.
And even in those programs, when you do open up a program, you couldn't get enough kids to join. I mean, to participate. So I know it's very, very challenging. But you brought up that's another question I wanted to ask. Can you talk about the difference between licensed and unlicensed programs? And for unlicensed programs, I read the report. Maybe I read it wrong. So does our after-school programs or like our soccer programs, is that considered unlicensed? Yeah. Give
Okay,
us a little.
so the state requires, for a licensed child care program, you have to have a director, you have to have teachers that have X number of early childhood ed units. And sometimes a children's center permit, especially with those centers that receive the funding from the state. Our after-school programs are not licensed, which means when a program is licensed, you can operate up to 40 hours or more per week. Under unlicensed, you can only operate 20 hours a week. So our soccer programs, they're sports program. We have children in custody, but they are sports, so they're being supervised freely in public space. But in a licensed programs, usually they're contained in an enclosed environment where you have square footage needs, you have restrooms capacity, outdoor space capacity. Those are fixed by the state, and you must adhere to that.
So is a soccer program considered unlicensed, or is that
That's not
unlicensed is just like a child care, but under 20 hours a week.
Right. When we pick them up from after school, Monday through Friday, they're picked up and they go from 2 to 5, under 20 hours, 2 to 5. They have early dismissal. We pick them up 1 to 5 or something like that.
Mr. O'Farrell, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Out of curiosity, so which are the two sites that are currently open?
Jim Gilliam Child Care and Ralph Parsons, which is at Expo.
Okay. And so that means there are 24 others that are not currently used as child care facilities.
I'm
Right.
sorry, they're used for after school right now, unlicensed.
Right. Unlicensed after school. And there are still periods of the day when they're underutilized.
Very possible, yes.
And of the two that exist and are operational, are they to capacity?
Yes,
They are.
yes.
Okay. I was, as you were giving your report, I remember the Glassell Park Rec Center Child Care Center opened in 2002.
Right.
And then it had to close down, I think, during the recession, if
Correct.
I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And so it falls in that category of being somewhat utilized for after-school programming.
Correct. And summer day camp and meetings or whatever in the
Right.
evening time.
Do you think, and this is not anything that I have like an agenda for, but do you think perhaps we're not going to re-enter the Rec and Parks child care sort of system again, possibly? Depending on what happens, if, talk about assistance with the county, it sounds like it's not necessarily a focus. And perhaps it shouldn't be.
I mean, I think it was an important thing for us to have and do. I would say it like this. I wouldn't like to close the door on that. There is a lot of, even at in the recent presidential races and conversations about about this very issue. I mean, it's
Refocusing on funding
refocusing on it. I mean, we have facilities that we're not using them the way we built them to be. It would be, I would love to see the department get back to that, but it'd have to be it's an extraordinarily expensive operation to do, because you just can't charge for the care that it costs, and,
More expensive than other programs, more rigorous in terms of licensing.
huge responsibility, especially with if you have, children, that young and you have them, 8 hours a day, it's a much higher, responsibility to the park, and we had dedicated staff that's what they did,
Right.
and it was you can't do that and and the other stuff, and as Carolyn was saying, we had our facilities those facilities had their own little playground, they had their own, it was essentially a little school,
Sure.
So I don't know, do I see anything on the horizon? No, but at the same time, I know that there's still if you could afford to do it,
Right.
it's still an important thing to.
Have you explored partnerships?
We have a number of, partners. It's,
But I mean, as far as just to take over one of the child care centers entirely.
I'll let Carolyn's, I know, I think we've looked at it, but I don't know that anybody has been able to, it's
Right.
just,
It
it's
sounds
hard.
like- yeah, it sounds like there are a lot of obstacles, and there's not too many agencies or institutions that are in that game.
Yeah.
Correct. The only ones we have on our sites are some of the Head Starts
Okay,
that are utilizing park property.
okay.
A lot of it, Councilmember, and we could easily do this. Now I'm just sitting here thinking, I think what I'll do is I'll overlay our child care centers inside of this program to see where they land in the economic areas of the city. But
Interesting.
I'm sure. I'm just thinking of where they're at. It'd just be an interesting. If we have to report again on this, it'd be interesting to have that data. And it would be easy to do.
It would be. Would it be too outlandish to suggest exploring you talk about joint use agreement with the schools on school property. What about the reverse? A joint use agreement with LAUSD schools on underutilized child care centers that are on rec and parks sites. Unorthodox for sure.
I don't know. I don't know if that's their business, but it's not. It's worth a discussion, certainly.
It'd be interesting to see what the assessment brings.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. And, I'm going to move this along to the council, but I do want to make one friendly amendment because I know, this is so important. And to the makers of the motion, Councilman Krikorian, along with Councilman O'Farrell and many of the colleagues who all signed on. And this is a very, very important aspect, childcare, but it is one of the most difficult, and even in our own past experiences. And I know even the county has problems. So, and I know this motion, it goes beyond just asking what we're doing currently. There's also asking for looking at potential ballot initiative and all sorts, so we're going to move this along. But I am going to add an amendment to say if the CLO and the CLA, CAO, Recreation and Parks, any of the other departments working on this motion could interface with, at the very least, the county, Los Angeles County, because they have an ongoing needs assessment, and so we could leverage any opportunities. Like, for example, I think the county has some money but don't have facilities. So that might be an opportunity for them to leverage some of their existing funds. But even that's not enough. So however it is, I think it needs to be, even if we go forward with this on whatever version it comes out, I think it really has to be a city-county joint initiative, because I don't think that it's too, city, even though we're second largest city in the nation, we're too small to tackle this alone. So if we could add that recommendation and move it along to council.
Yeah, no objections. Good idea.
Great. With that said, the motion is approved. And there is no public comment on this item, and I think do we have any other business before us? Nope. Okay. Then meeting is adjourned. Thank you.